I've had a lot of combos with my teammates. They are disgusted by some of the things that were said in the article.
Don't let your teammates bully you. You're right, they're wrong.
Reasonable people can disagree when it comes to this topic, but there's no need to go to name-calling and bullying.
This insistence from trans rights activists and people on the left that trans women are women, and they reduce it to this one sentence, this one slogan. That's what creates this ridiculous argument.
Patriarchy just hate women and just want to bully them on every single level.
What a statement of utterly cretinous absurdity. The International Olympic Committee says it's moving toward a complete ban on transgender women in female categories, ending years of dithering and delay. Initial findings from a science-based review indicate that athletes born male retain obvious physical advantages even after treatments to reduce testosterone levels. The ban will be in place before the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. This is despite Democratic candidate for governor Betty Yee telling me that she'd like to see a gender-neutral Olympics.
I think transgender female athletes are women athletes, and they should be able to compete.
Really? So if you were governor of California, you would support biological males who identify as women competing in women's sport in the Olympics?
They are now identified as transgender female.
And you think that makes, and you think it's fair that they should then compete in women's sport?
I think they should be able to compete in women's sports.
Well, as ever, trans activists blame right-wing flamethrowers for amplifying a minority issue. But this week brought more evidence that if there is any organised lobbying to silence criticism from the other side, it's the LGBTQIA2SL+ campaigners. The leaked BBC memo, which exposed its hatchet job on President Trump, also had plenty to say about this issue. It revealed that a team of specialist gender reporters kept critical stories off-air, resulting in, quote, a constant drip feed of one-sided stories, celebrating the trans experience without adequate balance or objectivity. These included glowing reports about the nutritional benefits of trans breast milk. Well, joining me now to debate all of this is Angel City FC's player, Elizabeth Eddy, commentator and YouTuber Blaire White, the trans rights advocate, Dr Helen Webberley, and the comedian and commentator, James Barr. Elizabeth, let me start with you. You wrote an op-ed piece about this issue, which led to a furious reaction from some of your teammates. First of all, for those who didn't read the op-ed, what was the central point of your argument?
First of all, thank you, Piers, for having me. You've got a really cool thing where you bring a lot of people to the table with different views. I think that's the way forward, so thank you. So what I wrote the op-ed about is that I believe women's sports do need to be for women, simply because biological sex is, as women are weaker than men, intersex, and trans athletes. That has nothing to say against intersex or trans athletes. They're people, and they're awesome, amazing, and they deserve to be respected. But because women have biological weakness, they need to be protected.
And what was the reaction to your op-ed? You had your own colleagues who you play with going public and attacking you.
We've all obviously seen the article that was written in the New York Post earlier this week, so I really want to start off by saying that that article does not speak for this team in this locker room. I've had a lot of combos with my teammates in the past few days, and they are hurt and they are harmed by the article, and also they are disgusted by some of the things that were said in the article.
So that was Sarah Gordon, one of your teammates, calling it transphobic. What was your reaction when you saw
that? Reasonable people can disagree when it comes to this topic, but there's no need to go to name-calling and bullying because it doesn't set a good example moving forward.
I mean, that must have caused, I imagine, a lot of tension between you guys. Have you been able to resolve things?
As it stands, I have invited her to my wedding and she has said yes. And the invite's been sent out and it still stands because, again, I think offering an olive branch and trying to find the space where we can coexist and have these conversations is really important. But I haven't heard back yet.
I mean, my experience, I have to say, is that if you raise your head above this parapet, we've seen it with Riley Gaines, J.K. Rowling and others, any woman who stands up and says this is unfair, which it is, immediately gets branded transphobic to shut them down. Do you think that that is a pretty lazy and disingenuous way of dealing with this debate?
I do, and I also understand where people can get really emotional, and that's where it might take a little time to come back to the table. But I do think in time, like given like compassion and kindness of just showing goodwill of continuing to say, hey, I'm here to discuss, we can do this together. We don't have to fully agree, but we do need to talk about it so we can move it forward instead of completely shutting down the conversation.
Okay, Dr. Helen Webberley, I mean, I literally had a candidate to be governor of California on 2 weeks ago, arguing there should be a gender-neutral Olympics, seemingly oblivious to the reality that if there was a gender-neutral Olympics, women would barely win any medal. They might win, I think, 1 or 2 bronzes in the entire Olympic Games. It would be the end of women's sport. So why is what we've just heard from Elizabeth wrong? Why is she not actually just defending the obvious integrity of women's sport against something which is obviously unfair?
I mean, I think, Piers, that we all want fairness, and we all want we don't want anything to be unfair, and I think that's what your guest is saying. That, but it's what is making it unfair? Is it the fact that they are transgender? Or is it the fact that they have a bigger body or bigger lung capacity or a stronger grip or better exercise tolerance? And it's, are we banning the right thing? Are we banning the thing that actually leads to unfairness, which is a gender identity, rather than the advantage? That's the question. We all want fairness in sport, and nobody wants women's sports.
Well, no, but the obvious question, well, would you endorse a gender-neutral Olympics?
I don't think that's the way forward. No, I don't think that everyone in the same...
Why?
Well, for the very reasons that you've just said. I mean, you say that we'd only get a few bronzes as women, but maybe in the less powerful sports. I mean, I can't see a gender neutral Wimbledon final ever having a female winner. But darts or...
Why do you think that is?
Well, you know why it is, because the majority of adult men who've gone through puberty are stronger, as your guest said, than adult females.
Right. So you agree that actually that trans athletes should be banned from the Olympics, as appears to be what's about to happen?
Why are you banning trans? It's the transgender thing, because it's that blanket ban of a gender identity.
Because they're biological men.
But again, that's just a sex. But what we're trying to do is fairness in sport. So we want people to have...
It's not just sex, it's their biology. Their biology gives them an unfair advantage over biological women. It's just a fact. That's why we separate.
I think that's, Piers, sorry to interrupt. I think that's a bit of a sweeping statement.
Actually, is
and a
right.
bit dumb of you, to be honest, if you're not actually listening to what
the
doctor you've got. Well, it's not about whether they're trans or not. It's about their biological differences. And if we looked at sport and if we looked at everybody's bodies and capability different and categorise people by strength, then we could have a gender-neutral Olympics, because we'd have people who are equal playing against each other.
Okay. Which event do you think we could have a gender-neutral?
I have no idea, but if you
Olympic?
look at people's bodies and their shapes and their sizes
and
their strength instead, I don't know,
give
slapping. Let's look at slapping contests. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people that would like to slap you regardless of shape. But to be honest with you...
I'm sure there are, mate, but I'm sure there are, but would you like to see 100 metres, for example, which had men and women in it?
I'm only saying that would work if people are categorised by their ability rather than their biological sex. That's
no, it's complete nonsense. It's complete nonsense.
People's biological sex affect their ability.
Well, in which case they wouldn't be in the same category, would they? But if you're looking at it fairly and openly for everybody, you would look at capability. And if it so happened that all men were separate because they were definitely better than women in this case, or stronger, or whatever it is you're saying, then you wouldn't have them together.
James, you're totally and utterly deluded.
Well, I think you're deluded because you're always making this debate
and then a third category for this gender-neutral idea.
Let me explain something to you. Serena Williams was asked publicly on television whether she could beat any of the top 1,000 men. I think John McEnroe had said it, and then she was asked whether she agreed that none of the top 1,000 men would lose against Serena Williams at her peak. That she's the greatest tennis player in female tennis history. She admitted that she would probably not beat any of the top 1,000 men players in the world. Right there, is the problem. Because Serena is a fantastically strong, powerful female tennis player.
But we're not talking about men. We're talking
the greatest to ever play the game.
We're talking about other women, trans women.
We are. No, We're not. This is the problem, though. We're calling them women. They're trans women and they're trans athletes.
But we aren't aware of when they transitioned or what their biology is, and that, I guess...
It doesn't matter.
It does, actually.
It doesn't matter.
The thing is...
Their biology.
I think
What matters is their
what we're really talking about. It does matter. And
no, what matters is their biology.
Are you a
Blair?
Are you a doctor?
Dr. James Thornton,
So
representative
here's
of
the
IOC.
thing.
I know more than the
that
doctor, yes,
evidence.
about this.
Right,
yes.
sure.
Okay, Piers did throw it to me, so if I could just say, 4th grade biology debunks trans women in women's sports, so the fact that the IOC even had to weigh in is actually really sad. I don't really know the argument that these other two on the panel are trying to make. Yes, there are biological differences from trans women and biological women because there are biological differences between men and women. And I feel like they're kind of playing this game of like, they just don't want to admit it, but this is that like 80-20 issue, at least here in the States, that like it's ridiculous it's even being debated. And the fact is, it's not just a few things that differentiate men and women when it comes to puberty. It comes to heart size, lung size, bone density, overall size, height, lung capacity. It's such a long list. It's so thoroughly debunked. And frankly, you know, as a trans person on the panel, I'm so sick of these sorts of issues being pushed on to women, first of all, and also trans people. The last decade of these progressive policies that have supposedly meant to push society forward into a more inclusive society to help trans people have actually just turned trans people into this political football that no one, frankly, on this side that I know of asked for. But then you always have, and this is a perfect example, time after time on this panel, people who are not trans arguing for these policies that do nothing but enact backlash against trans people. And so it's kind of hard to understand where you guys are coming from. I know you're doing it in the name of like fairness and equality, and you want to fight for the underdog.
Can I tell you
But I
where
think
I'm
you guys
coming
have
from?
it twisted who the underdog is, because if it's a woman versus a trans woman in a sport, the underdog is the woman.
Can I tell you where I'm coming from? Because I think that's a really valid
Feel
point,
free.
and I appreciate it. I am basically here because I genuinely believe that conversations like this are using trans people as a political football, and it's ridiculous and wrong. And actually, when we're talking about fairness in women's sport, we shouldn't be focusing on 0.0001% of trans women who compete in the Olympics. We should be talking about pay differences. We should be talking about the misogyny. We should be talking about the fact that one statistic said 65% of women in sport in the UK have been abused by cis men. That's what we should be talking about when it comes to women's safety in sport, not a non-issue.
Those conversations.
Okay, hang on, Blair, hang on. I want to take him up on that. Okay, so you've just made a very impassioned statement about wanting to protect women and protect women's rights. Am I right?
Yeah, I feel like you think you've got some gotcha here, Piers, but I'm ready for it.
Not a gotcha. I'm just going to take you back to the Olympics, the last Olympics, where an Algerian boxer called Imam Khalif, who had been banned from the World Championships for having male chromosomes, beat up a young female Italian boxer so badly in the female competition that the Italian boxer quit after 40 seconds, saying she'd never been hit that hard in her life.
And they are a woman.
Where is your campaigning? Where is your campaigning?
No. And it's funny that you bring that up because
Imam Khalif is not a woman, and all Imam Khalif has to do is take a sex test, which will be what they all have to do going forward to establish that once and for all. But Imam Khalif has resolutely refused to do that. We know why, because she was caught before the last World Championships testing positive for male chromosomes. So you would basically be endorsing in your campaigning for women's rights and protecting women for biological men to get in a boxing ring and beat up women in a way that could endanger their lives.
Imam Khalif is a woman.
You are a ridiculously deluded hypocrite. Imam Khalif is not a woman.
They are a woman. That's what they've told us. They're a woman.
No.
I think chromosomes
That's
are
what
very
they've told you.
complicated.
All right,
I don't protest to know or understand chromosomes,
right.
but I do realise that some people
okay.
are also intersex. Some people have more chromosomes to the male or female. It doesn't mean they're not necessarily a man or woman born a man or woman at birth. And what you're saying
I've
here
just
is you're
decided-
basically
I've
saying
just
that I
decided,
am
James-
not advocating for women's safety because I believe that a man
not.
was okay. But what you're doing here is you're actually attacking a woman yourself. So are you advocating for women's safety whilst
No,
you're
no.
on television
No, I'm
across the
attacking-
world
I'm
attacking
Let me
a
answer.
woman
Let me answer.
for... Yeah, go for
Yeah.
it.
Let me answer. I'm attacking a biological man for cheating by competing in women's sport,
But they're not a
knowing
man,
that they
Piers.
have a superior biology.
They're
and
not here to
physique,
defend themselves,
which is
but they're
why
not a
they
man.
won. It's why they won the gold medal, and that is cheating. It's as cheating as doping. They have an unfair physical advantage, and in a boxing ring, it can be a fatal unfair physical advantage. So all the hypocrites like you, James, all
No, but
due
that comes
respect,
back to my
who
point
say,
about
I'm here to defend. I want to protect women against vile
It's just
cisgender
ridiculous.
men or whatever you want to
You've
call people
transitioned
like
from
me.
an equal pay
It-
argument, a
it is
misogyny
ignorance.
argument, and an abuse argument to
It is ignorance.
one woman at the Olympics in Paris.
Not one woman. Not one woman.
That's what
every
but
single
that's what
transgender
you've come back
athlete.
with. That's the argument you've come back
No,
with.
No. Let me finish my point. My argument is all trans athletes should be banned from women's sport.
And what do you think
They
should
either
happen
compete
to
against their
the misogyny that's occurring in women's sport by cis men? What are your thoughts on that?
That should also be banned and targeted and people held to account.
Do you think so?
Absolutely, 100%.
Do you think they're doing good enough? Do you think we should talk
So
about that a
many
bit
times.
more? Do you think the balance is slightly off?
I've probably written more about that than you have.
I'd imagine you have, yeah. I'd love to read
Yeah,
it. I
I
can't
have.
wait.
So thank you. Let me come back to Elizabeth, if I may. This is part of the thing, Elizabeth, is a lot of the people who kind of, in my opinion, virtue signal about women's rights. They do so right to the point where they cannot bring themselves to see common sense about this trans issue with sport. When to me, it's so obvious. And I say that as someone who identifies as pretty liberal, right? I want trans people. I think they have a right to exist. I believe they exist. I want them to have rights to fairness, equality, and safety, but not at the expense of women's rights. That's why I applaud you for that op-ed you wrote, because obviously, biological men, which is why we separate the sexes in sport historically, at the Olympics, at World Championships, and so on, they obviously have an unfair advantage. To me, it is the same as doping. You're just cheating.
I agree with pretty much everything you just said. And I think at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is protect women's category in all levels. So there is misogyny happening, but it almost happens in and of itself through this trans situation and intersex. But at the end of the day, like Piers was saying, the trans and intersex people are valuable. They need to be protected. They also are vulnerable, but they're differently vulnerable than women. And women do need their own category, which is why we fought for women's rights, why we have women's sports, why Title IX happened. And so moving forward, the same way women fought for rights to be protected and have spaces is the same way we can move to protect trans people and intersex people and give them opportunities in sport. This is newer and it's earlier on, and we're going to be in this together. And so we can keep having this conversation, but the women's category must be protected. And the NWSL needs to establish gender eligibility on biological sex to ensure fairness and continue the momentum we have going forward.
100%, Blair.
That's a really good point. And I think this insistence from trans rights activists and people on the left that trans women are women, and they reduce it to this one sentence, this one slogan, rather than acknowledge the differences between them. That's what creates this ridiculous argument and has people going against what I know is true, And I know that the two, leftists on the panel right now are very occupied with rights for trans people and for women. But I feel like there's been an erosion of the definition of the word right in recent years. I feel like people think that playing in a sport is a right. And this is not a right. At least in the United States, you have things like right to property, right to expression, freedom of speech, right to fairness under the law, not the right to fairness from a sports league, and certainly not the Olympics, at the elite level. So for me, this is the easiest thing to let go of, the idea that trans women must be in women's sports, especially if the trade-off is just getting people to take that community ever so slightly more seriously. And it's really, really difficult to hear people still insisting that this has to be an ongoing argument when the argument's been done, especially when you look at the election in the States in last year, almost a year ago now. We've really come to a consensus where it's like, we're throwing away the things that we realize don't work. We just made sure gay marriage is still a thing here in the States, but we're getting rid of trans women in women's sports because that's an excess. And it only stands to benefit these minorities that you guys are so fighting for to let go of these ridiculous ideas. Like, just let it go, please.
The thing is, James thinks he knows more about trans rights than you do.
That's absolutely
and
not
And he doesn't. And he doesn't.
I've
And
never
no matter
said
how
that.
much,
That's
you know,
not true.
he
And
doesn't.
actually, I agree with a lot of what you've just said, to be honest with you. I do think you're
Well, then what's
picking and
the
choosing
issue?
what things the American government are doing that you're okay with and aren't, which is interesting. You're completely denying a lot of things they've done wrong. But
Like what?
Well, they've banned abortion.
Like what? Because I
they're
don't know
telling
if
a
you
lot
think
of
that
women what
I'm
they can
someone
and
who
cannot
supports
do
everything
with
the
their
government
bodies
does or
across
something. We can
multiple
go through a
different states,
list.
and I think they didn't pass an equal pay bill. So, you know, I think we can pick and choose what arguments we want to bring here, but ultimately, I wouldn't say as a sweeping statement
Or we can
that
stay
they're doing
on
the right
topic.
thing on everything, which, you know, it's fine. But let's staying on topic. I do think you're right.
Right.
And I'm not insisting that trans women are in sport. I'm merely having the conversation, and I'm saying when we have arguments and conversations like this, what we're doing, and I think we probably agree, to be honest. I think what happens is we get into this big argument about women's safety, but we're really missing the point is that these people are humans and it's affecting not really that many people. The argument is affecting millions.
I don't think anyone
of people.
denies that they're humans, and I don't think the amount of people it affects. First of all, you guys have been saying the same thing, that it's almost virtually never happening since the beginning, when it maybe was a lot more rare, but it's happening all over the world now, not just in the States, also in the UK, clearly. If it's happening at the Olympic level, that's international. So I feel like you guys hide behind, well, it's not that many people. But then I bet if I brought up the topic of abortion, you're going to invoke the 0.5% of people who are 11 years old and molested by their father having a baby. That's what you'd like to make the example out of. So I don't think it matters how many people. And even it's still a lie that it's like almost no people. It's an ever-growing issue.
You know what? The reality is that a year ago, the United Nations came out with a report saying that nearly 1,000 medals had been deprived from biological females by trans athletes in sport at all levels in that year. And that's just completely wrong. If it was anything else that was causing that was that unfair, then we would just ban it immediately. And it's not because I don't want trans athletes to compete. They should either compete against their biological sex, as almost all of them have done far less successfully before, or they compete in a new category. You know, there are so many more people identifying as trans. Fine, you could be a trans female athlete, just compete, or a trans woman athlete,
I would love
compete
a
against
trans
other
Olympics.
trans women
Yes.
athletes.
I've had this idea
No
for so
problem
long.
with the Trans
I always say
Olympics.
this. Right. I always say
No
this. I've
problem.
been saying it for years. Why isn't there a league just for trans people? There certainly is enough of them, especially these days. And historically,
Totally agree. And
a
you
lot
know
of
what?
different groups.
And you know what, Blair? I agree. And you know what? You never, ever, ever read a story about a trans man dominating men's sport. Why do you think that is?
Right.
Why is it always
Right.
only the trans women? Oh, could it be because trans men are biological female and therefore have a physical inferior disadvantage when they compete against
Or
men?
could it be that
Yes, I think
society,
it
the
could be.
patriarchy, just
And-
hate women and just want to bully them on every single level?
Yeah, no,
What
it
a
wouldn't be
wonderful
that
way
one,
to
actually,
end.
no.
What a statement of utterly cretinous absurdity on which to end. You never let me down, James Barr. Thank you all very much indeed for the debate. Elizabeth, I'm right here for you in your op-ed. Don't let your teammates bully you. You're right, they're wrong, and history will judge you accordingly.
Elizabeth
so thank you
had
very
good
much indeed
nuance.
for appearing on Uncensored. Yeah. Elizabeth and I were
you,
saying
guys.
the same thing. You
Really?
just prefer the way she says it.
Your book's called Woke is
thank
Dead,
you all
not
very
woke.
much. I appreciate it.
Not Nuance is Dead would be a
Woke
better
is
title.
dead, but unfortunately, it is dead. But a few people like you keep popping up.
Empathy is
it's
dead
a bit
would
like
be a
whack-a-mole.
good title, I think.
We have to whack. It's like whack-a-mole. We have to whack you back into your box whenever you emerge. Thank you all very much. Piers Morgan Uncensored is proudly independent. The only boss around here is me. If you enjoy our show, we ask for only one simple thing. Hit subscribe on YouTube and follow Piers Morgan Uncensored on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And in return, we will continue our mission to inform, irritate and entertain. And we'll do it all for free. Independent, uncensored media has never been more critical, and we couldn't do it without you.